So what do this Muzak ashtray, this photograph of JFK drinking a cup of coffee, this history of Cuba, this bright red Rivoli accordion, and this Magnavox branded CD player all have in common? Hey there, thanks for your click. And in order to find out the answer to that question, you'll just have to watch episode 2 of GotTech. Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining me for episode 2. If you're interested in episode 1, which was about the first commercially available CD changer, you can click on the link in the description. And also, please don't forget to click on that subscribe button and on the little bell thing so that you will be notified of any future videos. Now, like I said in the intro, I'm going to talk today about this Magnavox CD player from 1987. And this is not technology that set the world on fire, but the story of how its original owners acquired it in 1987 and how I myself acquired it here in 2019, well, I bought it in 2019, it's 2021 now, is a really fascinating one that involves the post-World War II economic boom, corporate takeovers, bank accounts, bundling, legal entry into other people's homes. There's a lot of stories here, and I'll show you the CD player too. But first, let's do a little bit of history, go back in time, and figure out the answer to a really intriguing question. Why do so many Americans have so much stuff? We've all heard the story about the American economic boom in the years following the end of World War II, but it is a story that bears repeating. When the war ended in 1945, Americans were in a very tenuous economic situation. Though unemployment was incredibly low, only 1.2% in 1944, which is a record that remains today, those men, women, and children who remained home during the war had been through months and years of rationing. And many people worried that the American economy wasn't quite ready to move from manufacturing munitions to manufacturing, say, ovens and living room sets. But their worries were misplaced. Actually, they shouldn't have worried at all. In the months and years following the end of the war, the American economy actually proved far more flexible than many thought it would. And there was so much money that had been saved up. So much money. I'll give you an example. By the mid-1950s, the average disposable income of an American teenager was nearly $11 a week. Now, that might not seem like much today, but keep in mind that in 1941, 15 years or so earlier, $11 a week was the disposable income of the average American family after all of their essential bills were paid. So in the 1940s and 1950s, Americans bought stuff. We bought homes and furnishings for those homes. We bought books and records and clothes. We went to see movies. We bought a hell of a lot of cars. Automotive sales actually quadrupled between 1945 and 1955. In 1940, America's gross national product, that's the measure of all goods and services produced, was about $200 billion. By 1960, it was $500 billion. That's a lot. And so we bought and bought and bought and built and built and built and bought some more, all the while being promised by advertisers that we'd only be happy if we owned the latest and greatest gadgets, that the probability of our post-war success increased in relation to how much stuff we owned. But of course, you can't just acquire forever. Sometimes you have to get rid of things. And here in America, there are a few ways we do that. Like many other countries, we have yard sales and garage sales, though we don't have car boot sales like our friends in the UK and Ireland. We take our gently used stuff to charity shops. We sell and trade on Facebook Marketplace. But one of our most uniquely American ways to unload excess possessions is one of my personal favorites, the estate sale. Now, if you don't live in the US, you may not be familiar with the estate sale, so let me tell you a little bit about it. I do consider myself kind of an expert. In fact, a few years back, I even wrote an article about estate sales for a local magazine. Now, some estate sales are just glorified moving or downsizing sales. But a true estate sale usually happens, sadly enough, after a loss. In most cases, someone, an elderly relative like a parent or a grandparent, has died and left a home full of possessions. The members of that person's family will contact a company, usually a company with a name like Big Mike's Treasures or, and this is the actual name of an estate sale company in my town, Reminisce with Kathy. Representatives from the estate sale company will then enter the home and, over the course of a week or two, evaluate and price every remaining item. Then, over a long weekend, they'll open the house up to the general public, that's us, who can wander around and buy whatever we want. As I said, I love estate sales. I live in the greater New York City area, and I've been going to them for several years, at least pre-COVID, although in-person sales are starting up again. I don't generally buy anything. I usually just look around. But sometimes there are items I just can't pass up. I've been to some great sales, and I've seen the insides of some great homes. My eye tends to wander to the small or to the unusual items. I appreciate vintage advertising, vinyl records, and vintage clothing. And of course, I love vintage electronics. Now, I've bought a number of pieces of vintage audio equipment from estate sales over the last couple years. And at the end of the video, I'm happy to share with you some tips and tricks that I've found if you're interested in doing so yourself. But we still haven't talked about this Magnavox CD player. Now, obviously, I bought this at an estate sale here in Connecticut. What good would all this run-up have been if I just told you I bought the thing on eBay? And interestingly enough, it came in its original box, post-dated in 1988. Now, I was curious about the return address on the box, a company called J. Edward Connelly Associates, based out of Pittsburgh. And speaking of curious, you yourself might also be a little bit curious about Magnavox. If you didn't grow up here in the US, you might not be familiar with the Magnavox brand. And you might be quite confused as to why, back in the 1980s, their CD player commercials all made this claim.
Sounds good too. Well, what do you expect? Magnavox is the company that invented CD technology.
This is a commercial for this clever little portable CD player from Magnavox, the inventors of CD technology.
But wait, you're thinking to yourself, wasn't Philips the inventor of CD technology? Well, you're right, they were. But they also bought Magnavox, which was founded in California in 1917, back in the mid-1970s. And why did Philips decide on Magnavox as their American subsidiary? What was the incredible piece of technology that the acquisition of Magnavox would allow Philips to distribute worldwide? Oh yeah, baby. We're talking about LASERVISION. Yeah, LaserVision didn't really work out. But Philips did end up using the Magnavox brand to rebrand its Philips consumer electronics devices here in the US. Now, these were not high-end devices. You usually found them in department stores and discount stores. But the Magnavox stuff wasn't half bad. In fact, this CD player was made in Belgium, which is unusual for something here in the US. But anyway, before we get to that, I had this other question about J. Edward Connelly. Who was this person? It wasn't an electronics store that I was familiar with. What was the deal with old J. Edward? According to his obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, John E. Connelly was quite the entrepreneur. Born in 1925, he endured a hard-scrabble childhood in Pittsburgh, where he went to work in the coal mines at age 16. Connelly never attended college, choosing instead to work as a newspaper reporter. But his head for business quickly got him out of the journalism game, and he made his first million founding a company that, according to his obituary, supplied banks with dinnerware, that they could use to lure new depositors. He became the king in the US of what Fortune magazine called make a deposit, get a toaster bank marketing. You see, back in 1933, a law was passed here in the US that banned banks from offering interest-earning checking accounts. So if a bank couldn't attract new customers by offering higher interest rates, what could it do? Well, it could give you something, like a toaster or a clock radio, that had some value, but was also what Josh Mabus, a marketing guy, calls a duplicative extravagance. Because, you probably already had a toaster.
There's a new spirit of doing business in the 80s. Share it at Manufacturers Hanover.
Throughout the 1980s, banks continued to fight for customers by offering gifts that were a bit more high-end than a traditional toaster oven. Like a Magnavox CD player. I mean, as far as I can figure out, that's where this CD player came from. A warehouse in Pittsburgh to a family in Connecticut. And all because they opened a checking account. So here it is, the Magnavox CDB-473, and I will place underneath it the Philips model number. Of course, it is just a rebadged Philips machine, as I mentioned. What I love about these units from the 80s is a number of things. Look at this fluorescent display. Let me stick a CD in here. First off, look at the size of this drawer. It's gigantic. Stick that CD in. It's going to whir around. And then it's going to give us, of course, the total playing time of the disc. But I love this fluorescent display. Let me take a picture of it and show you. There's just a really cool way that these numbers are outlined. And again, I'm not quite sure why there's an icon for the remote control to the left of the remote control sensor. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyway, this thing just starts right up. You hit play. Obviously, I'm not going to play any of this over YouTube because of copyright, but we start off with track 1. We go track 2, track 3. Everything works great. This favorite track selection, I'm not quite sure what that does. I can't get it to do anything. Whenever I push the button, it sort of flashes and then it doesn't really do anything. And if I turn the whole thing off, if I stop it and I hit that, it flashes and then doesn't do anything and then tells me there's an error. But you can certainly program. So if you hit the program button, oh, wait a minute, what do you have to do? Oh, right, you go track by track, and then you hit the program button as you go to the tracks, and this is going to program in. I mean, is this not favorite track selection? Is there a different way of thinking about that? And then, of course, when you hit play, you see all your programmed tracks there, which again, to me, seems a lot like favorite track selection, but it seems like there's a separate button for that. I'm not quite sure what that's for. Now, in the back of this unit, you've got your regular RCA right and left outputs. You've got RC5 in and out, and you've got digital out. The RC5 apparently is a protocol that Philips designed that allowed you to use any CD handset to control any compatible CD player. Again, like I said, I do not have an RC5 handset. I do not have even the original remote control for this. I must have thrown it away with the box. But again, it's a pretty bare bones unit, to be sure. Now, I went to open this unit and discovered to my horror that it has hex screws instead of regular Phillips head screws, so had to get a hex tool out. But look at how much room there is over here. And on the right-hand side of the unit, my God, they could have put an entire additional something in there. And here's some still photographs of some of the chips. I'm not going to mess around with anything in there. I teach middle school English. I don't take apart electronics for a living. But this is just a great example of this sort of very budget-minded consumer electronic device from that era. And it's amazing to think here we are in 1987, this was manufactured. Here's a photograph of the sticker on the bottom. And there's just so much miniaturization that's already occurred. This does not look like the inside of, for example, the Sony unit where everything is just jammed together. It's actually quite lovely. So what should you do if you're interested in buying some vintage audio equipment at an estate sale? Well, the first thing that I would suggest is that even though estate sales are getting to be back in person now as COVID numbers decline here in the US or in many parts of the US, there are a number of estate sales that are still happening online on websites like Auction Ninja. And you can hear the tumbleweeds blowing through a lot of these auctions. So you can usually find something pretty inexpensively at an online auction site. You're going to have to do a local pickup, and it might be a bit of a pain in the butt because there's usually only a couple-hour window on like a Sunday afternoon that you can go, but I would definitely recommend it. The second thing that I'd recommend if you end up in an estate sale situation in person is that you bundle your items. So if you find a couple of things that you are interested in buying, you can usually get the person running the estate sale to give you a bit of a discount. Because of course, if the family doesn't sell everything, not only will the family not get their money, you're going to have to take the stuff to the dump or to the charity shops anyway, but the people running the estate sale won't get paid either, because they generally will make a percentage of whatever the overall gross of the sale is. So you can usually bundle pretty well. You can also bundle especially well with audio equipment from the 90s. A lot of estate sale folk don't know what to do with that equipment, and a lot of it's really, really good. So I would suggest the 60s and 70s equipment and even some of the 80s equipment can get a little bit pricey. But some of that equipment from the 90s, you can get really inexpensively. And I mean, I only did pay $8 for this Magnavox CD player. So sometimes you can just walk in and get a great deal. Anyway, thank you for taking the time today to hang out and learn a little bit about this Magnavox CD player. I'll probably do a few more videos about items that I've purchased at estate sales. So again, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Give this video a like too. It'll help me with the algorithm. Stay well, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.